So in this video, we're going to look at how to migrate the historical data that's already there in Universal Analytics into Google Sheets or Bigquery. Initially, we'll start with looking at how we can bring the data from Google Universal Analytics into Google Sheets because that's a bit easier and accessible to everyone. And this method works really well when you have a really low amount of data in Universal Analytics. If you have a huge amount of data in Universal Analytics for a lot of years, then it's recommended to go for BigQuery option. And both the options that I'm going to show today are free. So it's just a matter of spending some time and getting things set up the way you want. And then we should have all the data flowing into either of these platforms, that is Google Sheets or BigQuery. Once we have exported the data, then we can use any data visualization tool like Data Studio or Tableau or Power BI and build visualizations for all the historical Universal Analytics data. So to get started, I have an empty Google Sheets, and what we want to use is an extension that is provided by Google. So you can install that by going into add-ons and get add-ons, and let's search for Google Analytics here and press enter. So this is the first result which we are interested in. So I've already got it installed, but you can just click on it and then go through the installation process. As you can see here, it's got over 10 million downloads. So this is a really good connector. So we can use this. There are also various other connectors that if you want, you can try out, but we're going to go with Google Analytics. So once it is installed, it will show up in here under extensions. So you can see I've got a few other tools that I've installed, but here is Google Analytics tool that will show up once it's installed, right? So here, the first step we're going to do is create a new report. Now, what this does is it allows us to select the account property and the views. So I'll just name this test universal analytics, select the right account property, and view all website data is fine. Now here is where it gets interesting. So we need to define the metrics and dimensions. So one way to go about listing what we want here is to actually go into Google Analytics, Universal Analytics, and see what reports we want to replicate in our historical data. Let's say we want to replicate the audience, browser, and OS. So you can come in here and see we have one dimension browser, and we have all these metrics that we would need if we wanted to replicate this report in our historical data. So we can just do that. So yeah, so we can add a few metrics and dimensions here. So let's try to replicate this report and see how that goes. So first we need browser. So under dimension, I'll just start typing browser, and we have the browser. And if we want to create this sort of a line graph which shows the user's metric by date, then we also need the date dimension. So I'll just add date. And for metrics, let's add a few metrics. So we need users, new users, sessions. So users, new users, and sessions, and bounce rate, pages per session, bounce rate, pages per session, and then average session duration. So we have here. So once we've defined our metrics and dimensions, you can even select the segment if you want all users, or if you have any custom segments defined. So you can define that here. I'm not going to use the segment. I'll just leave it as it is, and I'll just hit create report. So now you can see this extension creates a new sheet called report configuration, and we have the view ID and all the metrics we've defined and the dimensions, and you can set the limit of how much data you want to export. I think I'm just going to give it a really big number here just so that we're not limited, and you can set the start date And the end date, for now, I've just set it as 30 days ago and yesterday. But I believe this also works with the date format. So you can put not year. So we need year, month, and date. Something like that will work. If you want more information, you can come in here and click on this and scroll down here. We have the section called start date, and you can see here we can use the format year, month, date, or relative dates like today, yesterday, number of days ago. So this can be 30 days, 90 days, and so on. And similarly we can do end days as well. So we've just defined the default is 30 days ago and yesterday. To test this extension out, we'll just see how this works. And this is good for us. So now I'll come into extensions, Google Analytics, and then hit run report. And this works. Okay. So as you can see, we have the browser, we have the date and all the information that all the metrics that we defined. So this is good. You can even schedule this report to run automatically until you've migrated over completely to GA4. You can have this export daily. So you can do that by coming into Google Analytics and schedule reports. So if you choose to schedule this report to run every day between 4 and 5 a.m., let's say, then Google Analytics or this extension will come in here and look at all the reports that we have. Let me just say, okay, here. So if we schedule for this report to run every day, then this extension will come in and look at this report and see that, okay, we need to get data for last 30 days to yesterday, and then it's going to run every day. So what is recommended is I would change this to yesterday as well. So this can be yesterday and this is yesterday as well, just so that when Google Analytics, this scheduler, comes in and looks at the report, it's just going to load yesterday's data and it will append that data into this sheet where we already have some data, right? So we don't overwrite any of the other data. So I'm just going to leave this at 30 days ago, but this is how you would do it. We can come in here and create another report. Let's go back to analytics and let's imagine we want to bring in data from source medium. So here I would need the dimension source medium and some of the metrics that we've already used. So what I can do now is give it a name and select my account and the view. So in dimension, I'm just going to go source medium. Again, I'll include the date dimension just so that we can reproduce this line graph by day, and segment is all fine. So here we can either do this manually by entering all the users and other things, or we can just copy and paste this across. I'll show that in a second. So let's create report. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy and paste this over. So this is just another way, if you know all the metrics that you already want, instead of selecting them individually, you can just copy and paste them across. So here in this source medium report, it's going to look at last 30 days data, and then it's going to bring in all these metrics, right? So let's go and run this extension. So now you can see it ran two reports. One was test universe analytics and the next one was source medium. So if I click OK, we have source medium data coming in here. This is the report and you can see when this was last run and total results and everything here. And if we come back here, you'll see that this is the other report that we defined, right? So we have all the metrics that we defined in here. So that's a really quick way. If you don't have too much data in Google Analytics, Universal Analytics, you can use just this Google Sheets extension to export all your data into a Google Sheets and then save it there for historical archival purpose. And you can use this sheets in Data Studio or Tableau to plot and create some of the existing reports that's already there in Universal Analytics. And we'll look at that towards the end of the video. So what if you have more data, right? Let's imagine you have hundreds of thousands of rows already in Google Analytics, and you have a large volume of data there that you want to export. In that case, using Google Sheets is not recommended because I believe there's a limit on the number of cells that we can have in Google Analytics. I think it's 2 million or 5 million. I can't remember off the top of my head, but there is a limit. And also, if you have too much data in Google Analytics, what I've noticed is it becomes really slow to run sometimes and open. And if you want to do calculations, it becomes really slow. So that is why when you have large amount of data, it's recommended to use BigQuery. So for the next step, we are going to look at how to export data from Google Universal Analytics into BigQuery. Now, there are various paid tools out there that will make things really easy. But if you're looking for a free solution, then there is a open source project called Airbyte, which is really good. It has a lot of integrations and it's completely open source and free to use, but there is an option to pay for this as well if you don't want to go through the setup process. In this video, I'm going to show you how to use this free version, open source version, and load all your data from Universal Analytics into BigQuery. So to get started, you can come in here and look at airbyte.com, read through the documentation, see all the integrations that's available with Airbyte. So to get started with Airbyte open source, we can come into the documentation and look at deploy Airbyte. And you'll see here we have these three commands that are really quick and easy to get things started. So as you can see here, we do need Docker and Docker Compose. So if you come into docker.com, you'll see that we have an installation file available for all the major operating systems. So you can just install this and get started. And Docker, in a nutshell, is just an isolated environment where we can run some applications. And this is really good for development purposes. And even Airbyte, they do have options for deploying this if you want to use this in production. But for now, we'll just run it on our local machine, and that should be good for us. So I do have Docker installed on my machine. Okay, so let me just copy the first line and then we are going to pull the data that we have in this Git repository. So this is the Git repository. So I'll just come into my terminal and just paste this code and then hit enter. So that's going to start downloading all the necessary repository. I'm just going to pause for a second until this downloads. So now that we've cloned our repository, I can go into Airbyte by doing cd Airbyte and I'll do Docker Compose up. So before doing Docker Compose up, you just want to check if your Docker instance is running. So if you have Docker desktop is running, when you click on this Docker icon, it means it's running, or you can come into your terminal and then do Docker PS. So right now I don't have any containers running, so this is good. So I'll just do Docker Compose up. And what this will do is it'll pull all the images that is necessary to run Airbyte. And as you can see here, it's downloading all these images. And once it's downloaded, it's going to start this Airbyte application in an isolated environment on my local machine. And we'll use that to move data or export data from Google Analytics into BigQuery. So after a while, we'll have Airbyte up and running on a local machine. As you can see here, it says now ready and it's accessible at this URL. We do have some more messages in the console, in the terminal, but we don't have to worry too much about it. So if I come into my browser and paste this URL, we'll be prompted to give a username and password. So let's go back into documentation. So here it says by default, the username is Airbyte and password is password. So I'll just come in here. Username is Airbyte and password is password. And then I'll hit sign in. So once we log in, we are on a screen just like this. And here on the left, we see there are few options, the connection, sources, and destination. So this visual is really useful for us. So imagine our sources was Google Analytics here and our destination was BigQuery, and Airbyte is the intermediary application that will help us in moving the data between these between Google Analytics and BigQuery. So the first step is to actually add a source, and then we'll add a destination, and then we'll start running our report. So let's come into sources. Let's search for Google Analytics, Universal Analytics. Now we have some configurations here and it's showing some documentation on the right over here of how to set this up. And this is all well and good. So I'm just going to leave the source name as it is. And for credentials, I will select service account, and I'll show you how to create a service account in a second, or otherwise you can see how to create service account in this section here. You can see here how to create the service account and such. So let's do that right now. So to create a service account, we need to access our Google Cloud platform, and you can do that by coming into console.cloud.google.com. So once you sign up to Google Cloud Platform, you will have to create a project, or if you already have Google Cloud Platform, if you already have some of the projects, you can create a new project by coming to this gear icon and then hit click create project. I'm going to use this Stella project that I already have. So we load all the data in there. So to create a service account, we will go into IAM and admin, and then go into service account, select the right project, and you can click on create service account, and let's give this a name. So for the role, I'm just going to select editor role, but if you're going to use this in production, you will have to use proper roles where you just allow read access and write access to BigQuery, and maybe also to cloud storage. But for ease of use, for testing purposes, I think editor permission is fine. And then we can say continue, and we'll just hit OK. Now we can click into the service account that we just created, and we are going to come into keys and then select add key and then say create new key. JSON is fine, so we'll just create that, and you can just download this file to your desktop, and we can close this account. So I'll just open this downloaded file in my text editor, and this is how it looks. Let me just expand this out a bit. And the one that we are interested in is over here, client email and all these other details. And we need to add this client email into a Google Analytics account, which we'll do in a second. But let's go back into Airbyte and enter some of these details there. So in our Airbyte, we need to just copy the entire JSON file that we just downloaded and then paste it here. So I'll just control all and then copy, and then we'll just paste it here. So that's done. We have set up our service account now, and we need to set a replication date, view ID, and some of these things. So we can enter a replication date here. You can see example. So this is again year, month, and date format. So I'll just say 2022, maybe from October 01. And we need to get the view ID for our Google Analytics account. So I'll just come into Google Analytics and then come into my admin, and under view column, we can see the view settings, and this is my view ID. So I'll just paste the view ID here, and this is where you would configure some custom reports that we want to download. Now, Airbyte by default comes with all these reports that without any configuration, it will start loading all of these into BigQuery. As you can see here, we have some pages where we have the date and then the host name, and you can see some of the metrics that we'll be getting if we enabled this report and so on. But if we do want to add some more custom reports, similar to what we did with Google Sheets, we need to create an array of the name of the report, the dimensions, and the metrics. So if we look at our Google Sheets, so we do have some dimensions and metrics. So similar to that, we need to create an array here. So we'll do that next. But for now, we'll just go with all the default reports that already comes out of the box for Google Analytics via Airbyte. And we leave this as a default request time increment in days. So all this means is it's going to go with daily data. It's going to export data by every single day. If you want to do it for every 30 days or every 60 days, you would change that here. But in our case, we do need daily data, so we can plot a line graph or something along those lines. So I'll just hit setup source. Now it's going to go and see if we are able to. Now it's going to test, and then we see that it's failed. So it says, please check permission for requested view ID. So it says permission denied. This is what we would expect because we created the service account, but we never added anything into Google Analytics. So we'll do that next. So we'll come into Google Analytics and click on account access management. And here we need to add the email address. we need to add the email address from our service account that we created. And we see here we have this client email address that's being created for us. And I'll come into here and then say add users. Just add this, no need to notify because it's just a service account, and we'll give it editor permissions. Although I think viewer permission is just fine. I think all the metrics are okay. I'll hit add. So now we've added this service account into our Google Analytics. So let's go back and test the connection again. So I'll hit setup source. And now it says all connection test passed. So if we get to this stage, it means that Google Analytics as a source is connected to Airbyte. Now all we need to do is set up a destination. So we can come in here and add destination. We can select BigQuery, Snowflake, or any other database that you have, but in our case, I'll just go with BigQuery for now. And we have some configurations that we can set for BigQuery, and again, some documentation that helps us understand what each of these mean. So let's get started with this. I would need to add the project ID of my BigQuery project. So that is just that ID. Paste it here. Dataset location, I'm just going to leave it as US, and default dataset ID is, we'll create a dataset now. So if I come into my BigQuery and select the project I'm on, and then I can do create a dataset. Let's call it Airbyte BYTE Google Analytics and BQ. Data location is default, which should be US, and then I'll hit create. Go to dataset. So as you can see here, we've just created a dataset in US location, and this is our dataset ID. Or you can copy this, which is our dataset ID. Come into Airbyte, put that there. And loading method, we have two types of loading method. One is standard insert and one is GCS staging. And you can read through, and what all this means is standard insert is it's going to use, Airbyte will use SQL insert statements to insert data into BigQuery. And the other option is GCS staging, where it will write everything that is exported from Google Analytics into a storage bucket. And from then on, it's going to batch load all this data into BigQuery. And if we are running this in production, it's much better to have GCS staging and a GCS staging as our option. And also, it's much better if we have a huge volume of data. So I'm just going to choose GCS staging. So now this means we need to create a bucket and give the bucket path here. So for doing that, I will go back into my cloud, Google Cloud, and then go to storage, cloud storage, and we can create a bucket here. Let's call this Airbyte GA BQ. I believe this needs to be unique, so I'll just call it Stella. Hey, Stella, and continue. Just choose region US, and that's fine. And then I'll just choose enforce public access prevention. Yeah, don't want this table to be accessed by public. So now we have a bucket created here. So I'll just copy this name, come in here, bucket name is that, and GCS bucket path. This is a folder inside of this bucket. So we'll just call it Google Analytics. We'll just remove this forward slash. So that's fine. GCS temps files afterwards processing. So this is what we want to do with the files that will be returned into this folder after it's loaded everything to BigQuery. Do we want to keep these files or delete them? I think we can delete these temp files. That's okay for me. And we need to add the same JSON account key that we had created in our previous step. Just copy this JSON account key and paste it here. So for transformation query type, I'll select batch. So if we are loading a lot of data, then all this data that's loaded into Google Cloud Storage will be loaded into BigQuery as a batch. So that's fine. And the chunk size is it's just a buffer size 15 MB. It's fine. So let's check if this works. Oh, before that, we need to add a HMAC key, and this will allow access to Google Cloud Storage for us. So we need the HMAC key access ID and key secret. Now to create the HMAC key, we need to come into settings, interoperability, and we can add a key here, create a key. So we'll just select the key that we had created, Airbyte test GA, create key. So now we have information about our HMAC key. So I'll just copy this into my file here. And this is my secret. So we have all this information. So I'll go back into my Airbyte and then I'll paste my access key ID and secret. So access key and then my secret. So this is good. So now we can hit setup destination and see if the check passes. So now our destination was connected successfully. And if we do have a destination and source connected, so let's look at this for a second again. So we have both of these set up under sources and destination. So we can come into the connections tab and click create your first connection. So we can say source is Google Analytics, use existing. Destination is BigQuery, use existing. And here we have few more options to configure our connection. So the connection name is fine. Replication frequency every 24 hours. So similar to how we saw in Google Sheets schedule, scheduling reports to run automatically. We do have a similar option here. Or you can change to a manual frequency or a cron job frequency if you're running this in a production environment. I'll just leave it at 24 hours, and mirror source structure is fine. And here, what? So here are all the reports that that Airbyte will export by default. All right. So if you want, you can turn these on or off. So I'm just going to leave, let's say, pages on, and I'll turn the rest of them off. And if you had added your custom reports here, that would show up under here. So we'll do that next. So for now, no, just pages is fine. And normalized tabular data. So it's going to create a normalized flat table, which is what we want as well. And everything looks good. Make sure everything looks good and then hit setup connection. So now we've created our connection, and as you can see here, it says a sync is running. So you can click in here and you'll see some logs of how this process is working. And you can leave it a few minutes and come back again and see if the data has been loaded into BigQuery. So now you can see that it says sync was succeeded and it emitted 71 records in 53 seconds. And you can see in the replication tab, we only selected pages, and we also have transformations, which we look at in another separate video. This is where you can add transformations to the data coming in. So you would transform the data before loading into BigQuery and so on using dbt. So we don't need that. So status is good. Let's go back into BigQuery and refresh this page and see if our data has been loaded into BigQuery. So I'll select my project and the data set. So here you will see that we do have a table called pages. And if I click on the preview tab, you can see we have all the information that we specified is loaded into the pages table here. And let's just quickly look at adding custom reports before moving on. I'll come into sources, click on Google Analytics, go into settings, and let's add one custom report and see how that works. So we need the custom reports to have this format according to this dimension. So what I'll do is I'll quickly go back into my Google Sheets and then start creating this. So I'll just paste it here. So for name, we'll just give it, let's say we want to replicate similar to this source medium. So I'll just call it source medium. And for dimension, let's say we want to have this source medium. So we need to specify that in an array. So I'll just paste it here, source medium, and then let's also add ga date as it is here. So these are our dimension, and then we'll save some of these metrics. So I'll come into here, and then for metrics, let's just delete this, and let's just paste it here for now, and then I'll add inverted commas so that it's all strings. So this is what we want. So if we wanted multiple custom reports, so we can just copy all this section in the center and then comma, add this again. So we have more data here. So our first report was called source medium, and then you can change this into, let's say, browser report or something along those lines. But for now, let's just go with single array of report, and I'll come into Airbyte and then paste it in here, and then save changes and test. Let's just hit retest source. Let's go back into connections, and if I now look at replication, I can come in here and click refresh source schema so that our custom report gets loaded. So now it says it's found one custom stream called source medium, and we are happy with that. Let's just turn this off and then find our source medium. So this is the one that we created, right? Let's just hit save changes, reset affected streams. Yeah, that's fine. So let's try to replicate this data now. So now it'll reset the stream, and then we can do a sync again so that we have the source medium data custom report loaded into BigQuery as well. So now we have the data being synced. So if you just click into this, you'll see all the reports that will be synced. So right now it's just looking at source medium. Let's give it a few minutes and then come back and check if this data is loaded into BigQuery. Right now we have, now it says sync succeeded and it's committed 56 rows of data. So let's go back into BigQuery and refresh and see if it appears here. Go back into the project, data set, and we see the source medium table has been created here. And if we look at this, we have the date and we have the source medium and all the metrics that we have defined, along with some additional columns, which is default to Airbyte. So that's all fine. So we have data replicated in our BigQuery now. And if you leave this as it is, it's going to replicate this every day. So if we look at this frequency, we've set it to run every 24 hours. So you can just leave it as it is on your machine, or if you run this in a production environment, if you deploy it on an EC2 instance on either AWS or GCP, Azure, what, DigitalOcean, wherever it is, it's going to keep running this every day. And you can keep running this every day until you have all your data and all your setup migrated over to Google Analytics 4. So next step, we look at how to create some of these reports within Data Studio. So next we can come into datastudio.google.com and then hit create blank report. Now, before we add anything into Data Studio or Looker Studio, we need to make sure that this row here is our first row, because we have some additional data here which Data Studio won't like. So an easy way to do this is to either just delete all this, or if you're running this on a schedule every day, you can just copy this over to a new sheet. So the best way to copy all this data into a separate sheet is, let's go to the sheet and let's select this data. So I'll just say A15 to, let's call it Z, and you can see here all this data has been selected. So now if I hit enter, we'll get an error because we need to just surround this by array formula. So let's call it array formula and then do that. So now we have all the data that was in here in our new sheet in this section, and as and when new data gets added into here, all this data will show up in here. So we can just test it out here. So I'll just say test, and we'll see test appear here. So that's good. Now we can just use this sheet source medium processed in our data studio. So I'll go back to data studio and then add data. So this is the sheet that I'm interested in, source medium processed. Let's hit add, and we should have all the columns and rows for us to add into data studio dashboards. Okay, so we have some data here. So I can add the date range here as well and look at this date range. Let's add a date filter. So now let's say we just want to look at data in December. So I'll just select this month, apply. So now we just have filtered all the data by date. So I can descending order, sort this by descending order. And maybe if we want to look at last month, let's hit apply. And we have some data for last month. So now that we have this, I'll just copy and paste this. And let's turn this into a line chart. So under here, we have a lot of options here. So I'll just select line chart here. And we don't need any breakdown dimensions. So we just need the date and new users. So you can, if you want, you can configure this to show either by year or month or quarter and all these things. And this is okay. So this, I'll just select last 30 days and apply. And we have a line graph and some data coming in our table as well. And you can customize these reports as you wish. So this is powered by the Google Sheets. Now let's create another sheet which we'll implement with BigQuery. So we can create a new page, and here let's add a data source, and this time it will be BigQuery. Authorize. Let's select our project, dataset, and table. This time let's do source medium table. Hit add. Let's insert a table. Now this time this table is powered by BigQuery. So this is the data that was exported by Airbyte into BigQuery. So let's add the dimension date and source medium, and then maybe new users here as well. So this table we had exported from October, I think. Yeah, we had from September 29. So we have some data here. Again, you can do the same thing where we create a line chart and so on. And now if all the data is here, you can create as many reports as you want, as we have in our Google Analytics. You can have a table for each of these reports and create all these data. And as you can see in here, we have a lot of data here, and you can save millions or terabytes or petabytes of data as you want in Google BigQuery, and all the storage is free. It's we would be paying for all the queries that we would run on this. So that's how to do. So those are the two methods where we can use Google Sheets or Airbyte to load data into BigQuery and visualize them here in Data Studio. Now, I agree this is not the prettiest dashboard, but I just wanted to show how to add these data sources and get things up and running really quickly. And if you want, you can check out more of these charts of how to set things up and then build a really customized report and dashboard, and you can change the themes, make it really good, make it look really good and such. So at this point, I think I'm going to stop this video. You can see here though this is still running on a local host machine, and you can come in here, and to stop this, it's puts out a lot of logs. So if you want to stop this, you just press Control C, and as you can see here, it will stop all the containers that was running. And if I come into here and then hit refresh, now we don't have access to this local host. You can even verify this by typing in docker ps, and you see here no images are running. So that's a quick overview of how to export all your data from Google Analytics into BigQuery or Google Sheets, depending on the amount of data that you already have and what you want to do with this. And this is a really good alternative to some of the paid tools out there. So thank you, and I will see you in the next video.